the 17-year-old Pragnananda defeated world number 2 Ding Liren in the fourth round of the Tata Steel Masters. After 7 hours of play, Ding Liren resigns in an endgame that is completely lost, and Prag defeats the 2800 plus world number 2 Ding Liren, who was going to play in a world championship in a couple of months. Let's have a look at this beautiful game by Pragnananda. Ding Liren played e4. Pragnananda replied with e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, and bishop c5. The Jacobian opening. Castles, knight f6, d3, d6. The opening is very quiet. White just goes for c3 and d4. a6, rook e1, bishop a7 to get out of the d4 threat so that it doesn't come with tempo. a5, a4, castles. h3, bishop e6. Takes. So black's pawns are doubled, but there's a good open file for the rook. That's okay for black. Bishop e3, takes, and a5. So completely symmetric position. The only difference is the knight is developed for black, not for white. So it is equal. Knight d2, queen d7, queen b3, and b6. So black's pawn structure on the queen side is completely firm. Rook d1, king h8, getting out of the pin on the e6 pawn. Queen b5, and here knight d8. So Prag is inviting a queen trade, and Ding would have gone for his thinking it is completely equal. There is no risk. So there is no risk. White gets a d4 push first, but then knight f7, king f2, knight g5, king e2, takes, and knight f6. So if you take here, then black will also take on e4. Knight d2 was played. King g8, activating the king, rook f1, and rook e8. Rook f3. And here, Pragnananda goes for rook d8, pawn g4, and pawn d5, the central strike. So black is completely equalized. The idea here is if white takes here, again knight takes e4 would come. And the rook went back. Ding has played a nice move asking Prag to take here if you want to. So if you take there, then d takes e5, and it is still equal. If Prag goes for takes on d4, takes and then takes, but even here to win back the pawn, even if white doesn't have d takes e5, he still has g5. But the position has suddenly become slightly better for black because the knight gets a nice square on b4, and queenside structure for black is better, more space. e5, rook f5, and knight b4. So takes happen, takes, and knight d3. So Prag gets back the pawn, either b2 or e5. So Ding can choose. Ding chooses to play king c2 defending the b pawn, and now knight takes e5. So very less pieces, but again the pawn structure is better for black. There is just two pawn islands. White has three pawn islands, one here, and one here. This pawn is isolated as well, so there is pressure. Knight d2, rook d3. So Prag plays the next phase of the game where he has a slight advantage really well. Here in this moment, Ding should have played king c3, so that if rook c6 check, the king becomes active. But instead, he went for rook f4. That gives Prag quite a good advantage. Check, king moves, and knight d3. Black's pieces have become active. So the position is almost becoming unbearable for Ding. Rook d4 and rook check. King moves, knight b4 check. Beautiful position for black. And then king f7. So knight's active, rook's active, white's knight is not active, and black is now activating the king. And the pawn structure is better. Knight c4, king g6, attacking the g pawn. h4, king h5. King is going for the h pawn. Now with support of the rook, he can just take. So this is the moment where Ding has to go for counterplay. He cannot wait around. If he waits around, the game will be over on the king side. Black will have a pawn majority and black will win. So Ding goes for knight e5. Rook attacks the pawn and rook defends. And now Prag goes for the h pawn. So this is very nice. First, he forces the rook into a passive place. And then he goes to the h file to take the pawn. And here knight d7 takes and rook e7. So Ding goes for counterplay. He attacks the g pawn. You can't really defend this pawn. So you have to go for more pawns basically. So Prag takes the g pawn, rook takes g7. So it's right now a pawn up for Prag, but the c7 pawn will fall when the knight moves. King moves to h6 and rook goes to e7, saving the rook. King g5 and knight f8. So the h pawn and the c pawn are attacked. Prag has to choose. He will choose to save the h pawn because that's his pass pawn, right? So Prag played h5. So black is now winning. The advantage is right there with Prag. King moves and then rook check, king moves and then rook takes. Still, it's a pawn up for Prag. And black's piece is still active. Now it's all about, is this advantage good enough to win? Can Prag convert this good position into a win? Prag does it in good style. Knight moves, rook e5. And now rook d4. Rook comes behind the pawn. Rook check. King moves up. Rook comes to d5, defending the pawn. Rook check. King moves to f2. Now the plan is king g3 and push. So rook attacks the b pawn. Just rook defends it. Attack in the knight. Knight f4 and just push. Rook comes to g7, trying to stop the king from coming to g3 and defend the pawn. Cutting off the king, king f3, attack in the knight. Knight moves. So Ding is defending well. Right now, knight c6, the pieces are coming to the king side to help the pawn. Like knight e5 check and knight g4 is the plan. Knight check, king f4. Knight check, king moves back. So Ding repeats, showing that he's okay to draw, but of course Prag goes for the win. King goes to e3. Knight goes back to h3, and now knight d4, preparing knight f5. Rook g4 was played, attacking the pawn. Rook check, king moves, rook check, king moves, and then knight f5, defending the pawn with check. So firmly in control of his passed pawn. King d7, and king goes back to f3, kicking the rook away. And now rook check, king moves. Knight goes back to defend the rook. Knight check, king e4. Knight comes back, so Ding is forced to just wait. So how will Prag win this? His passed pawn is firmly blocked, but in the last few moves, he has forced the white king out of his space. White king is over here where it is doing absolutely nothing, and he's cut off from the queen side as well. So now Prag goes for the queen side pawns, attacking the pawn, b3, and now just rook b4. The pawn is falling. Now can Ding take the h pawn and then defend? But the rook will defend. Rook f4, king goes for the pawns, for the queen side pawns, and two of them are going to fall. And you can't attack it so easily. Pawn will run. So if you go behind, just king c3. And then if you try to bring your knight around or the king around to attack the pawn, it'll take too long. By the time both these pawns will be gobbled up. So it was a beautiful maneuver to make the white king get out of this area. And then the king side advantage shifted to the queen side play. And that became the deciding factor. And now king e5, and here Prag won because Ding Liren resigned. Because knight g4 is just a fork. So as soon as he played it, he resigned. I mean, even if Ding plays on with, say, king d6, it would still be lost after king c2. So it is a big day at the Tata Steel in Netherlands where the tournament is taking place, because in the same round, Anish Giri defeated Magnus Carlsen, the world champion. That was his second win in classical chess against the world champion. And here a young player has defeated Ding Liren, the world number 2, with beautiful endgame display.